welcome to this episode of Trojan Poetry. It's a very special episode because this is our 1-year anniversary.
Dun da da da!
Right? We did not.
Yeah!
Oh,
we
man.
made it. I thought it was well. All right.
Yeah. So our first episode came out on October 4th. We're filming this on October 6th. Little peek behind the curtain there.
Year in 48 hours.
A little peek behind the curtain. Yes, we do film these in advance.
That's right.
Most of the time. But yeah, so it's been a year. We have 54. This is our 54th episode. So we averaged more than one a week.
That's awesome.
Right?
We are cranking them out.
Yeah, we
don't stop.
In terms of minutes of views, we have 10,249 minutes of views. So with this episode, we might get up to 10,250.
One can only hope.
And we have almost 4,500 views.
That's pretty good.
So that's pretty cool,
That's
right?
pretty good. Thank you, everybody out there who's been watching us. We
Yeah.
really appreciate it. We put our heart and soul into this. In fact, I haven't been sleeping for days because we've been filming, you know.
Who are you filming with?
I don't know.
Are you filming another rival poetry series with somebody else?
It's Trojan Poetry Jr.
Oh.
All right. So anyway, what do you got for us, John?
This episode, we are going to do 3 things. We're going to read a poem, and then I've got a song that goes with the poem, and a picture. Because one of our goals, I think we both like to in class, try to show the students how the different forms of art, can work together or can mirror each other, or you can pick a theme and kind of find it in all the arts. So stick around. We've got a poem, a song, part of a music video, and a painting. So here we go. Mike has not read this. This is called Dawn of Man by Max Ritvo. Here we go. After the cocoon, I was in a human body instead of a butterfly's. All along my back there was great pain. I groped to my feet where I felt wings behind me trying to tilt me back. They succeeded in doing so after a day of exertion. I called that time, overwhelmed with the ghost of my wings, sleep. My thoughts remained those of a caterpillar. I took pleasure in climbing trees. I snuck food into all my pains. My mouth produced language which I attempted to spin over myself and rip through happier and healthier. I'd do this every few minutes. I'd think to myself, what made me such a failure? It's all a little touchingly pathetic to live like this, a grown creature telling ghost stories, staring at pictures, paralyzed for hours, and even over dinner or in bed, still hearing the stories, seeing the pictures, an undertow sucking me back into myself. I'm told to set myself goals, but my mind doesn't work that way. I, instead, have wishes for myself. Wishes aren't afraid to take on their own color in life, like a boy who takes a razor from a high cabinet, puffs out his cheeks, and strips them bloody.
That was a heck of a closer.
Yeah. Not...
Man, that came out of left field when we
Yeah.
got to that couplet at the end there. Well, the first thing I thought, just from the first 2 couplet, or I guess they're not really couplets, but the
Right.
first couple lines there, I immediately went to Kafka because a person turning into a bug or vice versa. It's too bad that Kafka kind of has just stolen the market on that, because as soon as someone else tries to do that, that's what I thought. And so I thought, I wonder what this guy is going to do with that same kind of metamorphosis type of idea. And what I was confused by, he said I was in a human body instead of a butterfly's. But then he feels wings. He does have wings, but he says they're the ghosts of my wings. Yeah. And and then he starts talking about spinning language over himself, which made me think of a spider. So he had a spider web almost going on.
Or a cocoon.
I guess that's true. There you go. There's the cocoon. But then the tone shifts at the end, the second half of the poem, and it becomes big picture. Him talking about himself, his thoughts, how he's ended up in this situation, until then you get to that simile at the end, like a boy who takes a razor, puffs out his cheek, and strips them bloody. Dang, what's going on there?
Yeah.
I'm sorry for my language there, but
No. Please.
all right. So what did you think when you picked this out?
Well, the first half, I don't want to say shocking, but it is kind of shocking, the imagery, or it's disorienting, right?
Yeah.
And I think after a year of this, I think, we realize I like poetry that is disorienting and that sets up some kind of puzzle or riddle that I have to try to maybe deal with or try to resolve. And like you said, that idea that he starts out saying, I'm in a cocoon, but then I'm in a human, but then I've got wings, and then I'm trying to make a cocoon. And then this whole thing about failure and dreams, like what's the difference between goals and wishes? And then I got to that last line. I was like, okay, that seems to be something entirely different. But what I came to, what I settled on with the last line is the idea that he's saying, or the last line at least, like a boy who takes a razor from a high cabinet, puffs out his cheeks, and strips them bloody. So after getting over the initial shock of that, I think what I thought was this is a little boy who's trying to shave. Right? He's thinking about growing up, about maturing,
Okay.
and he's like, that's it. I'm gonna shave, and he doesn't know how to shave. So when he shaves, he ends up bleeding.
Because you're not supposed to puff out your cheeks when you shave, right? That's a bad idea.
Uh-oh. Whoops. So then I was like, okay, so this is about a boy who's trying to grow up maybe too quickly, which ties back to the idea of coming out of a cocoon and having the wings that.
I see what you did there,
They're
and
real
that's not
wings,
quite
but-
so horrific. Sorry, go ahead.
Right. No,
Yeah,
it seems horrific at first, but then you're like, oh wait, like that's an actual real life.
Yeah,
We've all cut
situation.
ourselves shaving,
Right.
and if you're a child eager to do it, right, and it says wishes aren't afraid to take on their own color in life, right? The little boy wishes he were older, and he's like, that's it, I'm going to do it, and then he, starts bleeding.
Now, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. You were
Yeah.
talking about the wings, and what do you think about that, the ghosts of his wings? How does that play into this idea of growing up then? Is that the idea of losing your imagination as you move from a child to an adult?
Right, because he's like, he's in a cocoon, and then he's a human, but he still remembers the wings. Yeah, so I mean, ultimately, I don't think I ever pinned it down like a butterfly. I never pinned it down. But I thought this is about growing up, and it's about transformation, and it's about being in the middle, right? Kind of stuck in an in-between spot where you're not quite an adult and you're not quite a child or whatever it is you're transforming in between. And I just thought that was really cool, right? Like the disorientation of the poem matches the disorientation of that awkward age or time when you're in between two things.
Yeah, when you're transitioning, you feel it's new, you feel uncomfortable, you feel anxiety, which definitely, I mean, this poem, the first time I read it, made me feel a little anxious, 'cause it's like, where is he going with this? And then when he ended with those lines before you kind of explained it in a different way, I was like, oh my God, it was shocking. I think that's a good word for it.
Yeah, and but then I guess what I haven't quite got is the middle, after the middle, when he says, I think to myself, why am I such a failure? And, as a poet, because he's trying to use words, and maybe he's thinking that he's a failure as a poet. And he's, kind of humorously, it's a little touchingly pathetic. And he realizes that, he's a grown, but he's thinking it like ghost stories, kind of like that imaginary, the childhood kind of dream world.
Well, as a writer, you make your living creating stories which aren't necessarily true. It is like a ghost, right? You're creating characters and you're creating stories that aren't necessarily real.
Right.
Just as his wings are no longer real.
Right. So questioning even the idea of making stories or poetry or art. And then I had never heard of this poet, and then I started doing some research, and it turns out he passed away last year in 2016 at the age of 26 after he had been diagnosed with pediatric cancer when he was younger, and he passed away very young. And I wonder if the part about being paralyzed in bed for hours and setting goals like, okay, just like try to get through the day and set a goal for the day, but he doesn't want to have a goal, he wants to have a wish because maybe a wish is more free, right? So there's the idea of growing up, there's the idea of being a writer, there's the idea of dealing with illness perhaps, and again, it's all in this disorienting poem, which ultimately, leaves. I created a real impression.
Yeah, well, the fact that you add that biographical piece in there, that takes it to a whole different level. Of all the language of him laying in bed and feeling pathetic and feeling, being paralyzed for hours because he doesn't have a choice, and
instead of having a goal, I like that wishes aren't afraid to take on their own color in life, right? Like that he still is aiming for that imaginary thing, not just a scientific goal,
right?
But more of a figurative dream, right?
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So
Great choice.
Yeah, once I read this, I was like, oh, okay. Unfortunately, Tom Petty just passed away. And what a loss, right, first of all. And I thought immediately of the song Learning to Fly by Tom Petty. So we're going to play part of that, and we'll be right back.
Now some say life will beat you down, and it'll break your heart, steal your crown. So starting out, for God knows where, but I guess I'll know when I get there. I'm learning to fly, oh, when I ain't got wings, and coming down is the hardest thing. I'm learning to fly, oh, but I ain't got wings.
All right, so you just heard part of Tom Petty's song Learning to Fly, which I've suggested has a connection to or kind of mirrors or echoes Dawn of Man by Max Ritvo. Mike, what'd you think?
I was just telling the story about that. Was the one of the soundtracks of 8th grade for me. You know, that album came out on tape, and I think it had Running Down a Dream on it, and maybe Free Falling, and that was when
Don't
Tom
Come Around
Petty.
Here No More? That's it, right?
Yeah, well, I
Come
think that
Around
was
Here
more of an 80s one, but
The 80s
that's
was
yeah, right. 90s.
That's
90s,
the generation
90s
gap.
are where it's at. 90s are where it's at. So anywho, I love this song. I know it, and Learning to Fly, but I Ain't Got Wings, and Coming Down is the hardest thing. I always thought at first, that this was talking about, well, there's a couple, it could be about drugs, right, obviously, and it also could be about change and growing up. I'm learning to fly, and coming down is the hardest thing. You try something, you fail, and you drop, and it's tough, and I think that fits in perfectly with the poem. I'm learning to fly around the clouds. What goes up must come down. And when you talked about his biographical info, the idea that I don't know what his diagnosis would have been, whether they said it was terminal or how much he knew.
Yeah,
okay.
they knew it was terminal. For a long
Okay,
time.
so there you go. What goes up must come down. I mean, he knew probably as he was writing that poem what was coming. So that makes it hit even harder. What did you think?
Well, I like for students and just in general, I like to think about how, they tend to think of poetry as very strange and very foreign and, what is that? But it is, the themes are similar to what people write songs about. And again, the idea of transformation, the idea of growing up, wanting to fly but not knowing if you have wings. Because, in the poem, he's got ghost wings. And the ghost wings are pulling him back, and he's trying to negotiate that whole kind of psychological thing going on. So I think students might enjoy looking at the two.
Yeah, and it's multi-genre.
Right, and that was a big song, right? That was a really popular song. The poem, although maybe famous in the poetry world, right? Most people probably haven't heard of it, so it'd be neat to show the students. Or I think it's neat to think of that too.
Yeah, I like doing this throughout, especially with. When we're done reading a novel, I like to play them songs that fit in with certain characters. That's that classic create a playlist for a character kind of a thing. And we talk a lot about poetry lives on in some ways as song lyrics, because a lot of poetry, what was sung back in the day by the troubadours and things like that, poetry is meant to be performed. And so even if they don't buy into poetry itself, they can still find lyrics that speak to them. You know? And I think this one definitely fits.
And I think like the middle line there, and when the good old days may not return, right? Like this little boy at the end of the poem is trying to grow up, and we know he's going to grow up into an adult who has ghost wings, right? That kind of pull back and maybe help him fly too. So I don't know. I think that's a pretty cool connection. And I just wanted to say something about Tom Petty.
Yeah, right. Since unfortunately he just passed away.
All right, so the third piece here of art is I immediately then thought of a picture by Matisse, which is his picture of Icarus. And I have maybe, I don't know, Mike, what do you think? I'm assuming you know who Icarus is.
Yes.
Yeah. See, I
Yeah.
said correctly.
Right. Yes. Isn't that where you get your tires changed? Or
Yep.
is that, no,
Yep.
that's Michelin.
Oh, yeah.
Firestone? Anyway, no, I'm just kidding. Yeah, so he's flying too close to the sun, and I noticed the heart immediately. That was the first thing that drew my eye. And, Icarus is all about pride and about youthful, not listening to advice and things like that, and just kind of going for it. Obviously, it doesn't end well for him, but I also like the way that the figure is kind of twisted and contorted, almost as if he's begun to fall, because he's right there. I mean, the stars are all, and the fire, or the sun, is all around him. What made you pick this one?
Well, just because of the whole wings thing and falling and learning how to fly. But I guess when I was looking at the picture just a little while ago, people were describing him as floating amid the stars, and I've always felt like you just said this was very awkward, right?
Yeah.
And this is a person who is kind of in some kind of transition, either between flight and falling. Right. To me, this isn't a happy picture.
No. Yeah, he looks uncomfortable. I mean, he's contorted, right? He's got his one shoulder all kind of out of whack.
Right.
I almost picture him like he's about to just tilt and kind of go that way.
And these
You know
weirdly
what I mean?
heavy legs,
Yeah,
right,
pulling
that don't
him down.
make sense anatomically in any way. So again, I just thought, I like letting my mind kind of go from one piece of art to another and trying to find connections, and that might be a neat set of texts for students if you're a teacher,
Yeah.
or for you to think about. So
Okay, thanks for watching. Please join the conversation in the comments on YouTube or on Twitter at Trojan Poetry DGN. Also, check out our website at trojanpoetrydgn.blogspot.com.